second and let's have a conversation. So, you remember when I said that the scaling from the PTR as casters go into Molten Core is not all that spectacular? Well, since the data mine gear came out, and I do kind of tinker with making Shaman PvP guides from time to time on this channel, I decided to follow up the gearing up of the Paladin video with a gearing up of a Shaman so that we can compare and contrast what Shamans would look like spell power, critical strike, chance-wise on the NHP levels on the PTR compared to what they look like going into Molten Core. Now, just so we're clear, a brief refresher. Paladins went from Paladins went from like 4,000 HP to like 5,600 HP. Literally, it was like 4,300 to like 5,600. Upon actually being able to gear the characters a bit better and a bit more of the data mined gear coming out, they're actually sitting at about 5,200-ish HP. But that's with them having an absolute metric. They went from having like 400 plus healing to having like 600 plus healing, and they damn it, what am I trying to think here? Their fire resistance went from basically nothing to like 180. I'll showcase it here in a second, but it's actually ridiculous how beefcake the Paladin went from A to B. And so now we're looking at the spellcasters by contrast. Okay, so here we have a PTR geared Shaman. You can see he is in fact missing Librams. He doesn't have anything all that fancy or interesting going on with the enchants. He has double burst trinkets because there's nothing else really going on. Somewhere around here is plus healing. I have no idea where the hell the plus healing is coming from. Because when I look at spell power down here, we have about 340 spell power, but we have like 300 and... so it's like 20 plus healing coming from somewhere that I literally cannot identify. Like damage and healing. We got this ring because there's nothing really better. Spell hit's not the worst thing in the world. It's got a thick chunk of stamina on it. This is damage and healing, 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 and damage and healing. And then when I look at the enchants, it's like fire, health, stamina, firepower, like damage and healing, like movement speed, like what the hell? I have no idea where he's getting like plus 20 healing from. No idea. It's just there somehow. Don't ask me. Melee weapon damage 30. But yeah, I have no idea. No idea where the hell this extra a bit of plus healing is coming from. Okay, but you can see that his gear is giving him about 4.5 critical strike chance. His total crit chance is 8%, and he has 340 plus healing. Let's pull up some calculators. Ooh, I don't want to do that. Let me pull up a MS Paint. Nah, that's just stupid. What are we doing here? We'll pull up my Discord here really fast, and so we this P, typing P. Always pause the video. About 4k HP and what was that? 340 spell power. Keep in mind they get like plus 200-ish spell power from like Flame Tongue enchantment on their weapon or something stupid like that. So it's going to be a hell of a lot more than 340, which makes things even more interesting. So I'm just going to say they have 500 spell power. Literally 340 plus 160 from Flame Tongue, and we'll just call it good there. Totaling, equaling about 500, about 8.33% crit. What are we looking at here? Okay, 8.32% crit, like, okay. 2, 3, whatever. But then you flash over to, like, the Molten Core gear, and it was actually very difficult to gear up a Shaman in Molten Core gear. Took quite a bit of brain power and soul searching. The reason for this is some of the pieces have plus healing, and some of them have like spell power on them, and it's just all over the place with like the set bonuses, and it's just like, Jesus, I'm wondering if there still needs to be some data mine going on there. But basically, I geared it up so you have like 5-piece thunders. You've got a Drape of the Fire Lord. You have a Choker of the Fire Lord, which is insane. I don't know how the hell you got that on your character. You have a Seal of the Archmagus. You have a Tidal Loop because I couldn't find anything better. Then you've got 2-piece Legionnaires. It looks like I've got pants and shoulders. This is your PvP gear, and as you can see, it has damage and healing, right? Critical strike. The other ones didn't have spell power on them. I was like, all right. Yeah, it's also a piece of Throne of Five Thunders. Where's the other? Yeah. Okay, and then there's 2-piece Earth stuff, and it's the only pieces of Earth that actually have spell damage and healing on them, and I guess they also got crit. Where's the other one? Bindings? Yeah, okay. Spell damage, and a little bit of fire resist in there. PvP trinkets are stamina fire resist trinkets. And the reason why you're doing this is because look how fucking low your HP bar is as a shaman. Holy dear Jesus. Like, what is this shit? So the moment I literally come over here and it's like MC equals 4.3K. And if I'm being generous, this one over here isn't even 4K. It's just like, what the hell? You don't even go up in stamina worth a damn. The only reason you're going up in stamina is because I've literally ripped off spell power trinkets and just put on some defensive trinkets. Pretty messed up, pretty nuts. But you get like 60 fire resist here. You get like 20 fire resist enchant. You could even replace this 9 spell power with even 15% more fire resist. I've talked about fire resist and orc and how it's really powerful before. You can see you're hitting very close to the HP, the soft HP breakpoint. In fact, you're so close to the soft HP breakpoint, you're probably better off literally making this a fire resist enchant. That way you are not only at the soft cap for fire resist, but you have protection from you have protection from what little spell pen exists in the game right now. Specifically, it's like a ring from like Alterac Valley. Blah, 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 blah. What else is going on here? Yeah, and then of course I gave you a fire resist enchants because an extra 9 spell power, spell damage and healing, and an extra 200 HP isn't really going to move the needle anywhere near as much as going up 55 fire resist, to be perfectly honest. It just is what it is. I mean, in for a penny, in for a pound. And that's it. And as you're going to see as we scroll down here, our spell power is going to be absolutely abysmal. So you can see that now we have, but rather than 340 spell power, we have 357 spell power. And interestingly, we have even more plus healing that I can't really identify. Healing, maybe I'm crazy. Oh, I think I got like a 2-set healing bonus, right? Yeah. There's some healing bonuses in here. 44. 44 plus healing from the okay, that makes sense. Maybe that's where it's coming from, and the other one as well, the Throne of Thunders. Yeah, okay, it's definitely coming from the other. Okay, thank God, figured it out. But you can see we've gained almost a non-existent amount of spell power. We can definitely go more glass cannony and gain a significant amount of spell power, right? But that's assuming you get your hands on like a Choker of the Fire Lord and like a Drape of the Fire Lord. Like, Jesus Christ. You start sacrificing your resistances, you start sacrificing your stamina. It's just the worst thing since sliced bread. So for example, I could literally go ephemeral power, damage and healing. No, that's a burst trinket. Burst trinkets are actually pretty good on shamans, believe it or not. Fire resist, fire damage. Where are the is it still Braywood Reed? Do I still need a reed? Even a Molten Core I need a reed. Even Season of Discovery, Molten Core, I still need a reed. Is that what you're telling me? That's R-E-E-D, by the way, not R-E-A-D, by the way. I guess I need a reed. What the balls? Okay. Second Wind, I think has some damage. No. Oh, okay. Thank you, game. Weird. You'd have to put a Briar Reed on here, and even then you wouldn't even go up that much spell power. Totally not worth it. Okay, let's look at it here. But you can see critical strike chance has gone up rather significantly. So you went from like 8% critical strike chance to like a 12.5% critical strike chance. So you gained a considerable amount of crit, but you gained very, very little spell power. And this is basically a theme that goes forward for basically all spellcasters. They don't really start gaining in spell power until they hit AQ 40. But they start going up in critical strike quite rapidly, and when they hit molten core, they don't go up in spell power like at all. But they do go up in more critical strike chance. It's just a theme. But as you can see here, their scaling from the PTR to molten core is almost non-existent. Their HP bar is going up basically by nothing. Their spell power basically goes up by nothing. Their spell power can go up significantly, but then their HP bar doesn't even fucking move. In the grand scheme of things, you just end up with a badly built shaman for PvP. And then the only thing that's really moving the needle anywhere is their critical strike chance. Conversely, Paladin is just like, hey, I'm going to go up like, more than 50% HP, and then watch my DPS go up by like 33%, and watch my plus healing get increased. My bad. DPS go up by like 25%, and then watch my plus healing go up by like 50%. Like, what the balls? The other thing to note here is while I was sitting down in the shower, because I went and I packed and then I took a shower, and I was just sitting down enjoying the shower, raining on me basically, and I actually bothered to do the plus healing math. So I have it here in my Pally Discord where I'm basically talking about it a bit with the math. I'll just keep that on screen for a second here. Where I calculated that something like 100 plus healing on a Paladin, and I got it right here. If you're just using like Sacred Shield with like 1.5 Flash of Lights every 12 seconds, assuming they have like a 50% chance to crit, so when it crits, you stop healing, and then assuming like a 70% uptime on the Fanaticism Hot, the one that heals you when you crit, off of Sacred Shield and a handful of Flash of Lights alone, and a reasonable critical strike chance on your Paladin, 100 plus 100 healing is worth plus 12.5 HPS on your Paladin. In order to get plus 12.5 DPS on your Paladin, you would need something stupid. Well, okay. First off, you're not going to be able to get that with spell power unless you're specifically a Holy Shock Paladin, right? Because Holy Shock Paladin is the only Paladin that really has anything going on with spell power ratios. Know that plus 100 healing is actually on gear is the equivalent of like plus 60 spell power. So sometimes the gear will literally say if one piece of gear said plus 60 spell power, its equivalent would say plus 100 healing, basically. I could be wrong about that, but that's a very rough estimate of the ratio between plus healing and spell power. Not even Holy Shock is going to scale anywhere near as hard with spell power. And Holy Shock it's even better for Holy Shock if you're stacking plus healing, believe it or not. If we're talking about the melee classes, a good rule of thumb for Paladin in melee, as a melee Paladin, is that whatever's going to increase your white DPS, all right, double it. So, for example, if is it 70? I think it is 70, right? If 70 strength was given to give you 10 white DPS, in Season of Discovery, assume 70 strength is going to give you 20 DPS. And take a drink of water here. The reason for this is because it increases your white DPS, it increases your seal damage, and then Crusader Strike, and a combination of seal damage, Crusader Strike, and Divine Storm, all being rotated on cooldown, is basically doubling your typical Paladin DPS that we're used to. Very, 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 very rough estimate though. So it could be a less, it could be more. But very quickly you come to the conclusion that you need something like 78 strength plus 78 strength on your paladin to equal plus 22.5 DPS. And we sure as hell know that plus 60 spell power isn't going to get anywhere near 22 DPS. Or you need about plus 8% critical strike. I mentioned this because someone made a comment on the video. It was actually really, really good. Let's pull it up here. I don't want that. Okay, there's Asmon. Okay, cool. Really? Okay, this guy. Okay, cool. So someone made a really good comment while I was in the process of making this video. And I tried to explain the reason why things are the way they are. Like basically how Paladin has like 80% of their DPS. Basically butt naked with a two-handed weapon. And then from there, it's just a question of what scales better on your Paladin. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, one of my paladins can have like, a ×2 mana bar and like plus 400 healing. So that's like plus 90 HPS. And another one can have like a bunch of critical strikes. So you got to start asking yourself, which is the better paladin? Is it the 130 white DPS paladin with 135 HPS and then like a 6k mana bar with 8% melee crit? Or is it 150 white DPS paladin with 45 HPS, 3k mana bar, and 21% crit? You have to remember that whatever your white damage says, as far as Season of Discovery is concerned, basically double it. So this is basically 260 white DPS with 135 HPS, and then this is 300 DPS, but only with 45 HPS and a 3k mana bar. But you do have a significant increase in critical strike chance. Which paladin is better? It depends entirely upon what paladin build we're talking about, right? If we're talking about a deep ret paladin, specifically a control ret paladin, control ret paladin is perfectly happy going heavy on the melee DPS because that's just how they roll. They're not really that big on an they can endurance fight, but they're not super big on an endurance fight. You would actually want to lose a little bit of white DPS and a little bit critical strike chance in order to get this mana bar up to about 4,500 on a deep ret paladin. You don't want to be so all in like this. And these hybrid gearings, these numbers here is basically like Avengers gearing, for example. You'll have more than a 3k mana bar in Avengers gear or Marshal's gear, to be sure. It'll be like a 4k plus mana bar, which is more than enough. So deep ret paladins, they're like, especially control ret, more than happy to start stacking up the damage. They have repent to play with. They have 35-second Hodge stuns to play with. They got all kinds of nasty, terrible. They got rebuke to play with. They got all kinds of nasty, terrible, awful, no good things. It's the more durable centric playstyle paladins that really want to go the HPS route. The ones that don't get to tell the enemy to shut the hell up while they heal and then bitch slap them around a bit like a deep ret paladin can. The ones that are basically going to be taking spell blast to the face, whether they like it or not, and they just have to deal with it. When they're running at the enemy, they're taking spell damage. When they're running away from the enemy, they're taking spell damage. When they're forced to stop and heal themselves, they're taking spell damage. And they live and breathe off of HPS versus DPS and reflect damage. Eye for an eye and reckoning and that stuff. So Holy Shock Eye or Shock Eye Paladins, they have Repent. They're probably going to want to go HPS over spell power until they feel comfortable in their survivability, and then you basically they might have 2/3 of their, ideally they'd have like 2/3 of their gear being plus healing gear, and then like 1/3 of their gear being spell damage gear, or maybe 50-50, whatever is going to cause them to feel comfortable in their survivability. And then once they hit that comfort level, they just want to convert as much of the plus healing as possible into spell damage. That's basically how they roll. But until we figure out how that's going to look in the future, you just err on the side of just stack as much plus healing as you possibly can on your Holy Shock Paladin, and then you can pull it back and like season to taste, and you'll end up with like, rather than plus 600 healing, you might have plus 400 healing, but you'll have like 200 spell power. Then you have a Holy Reckoning, and then the variant of Holy Reckoning, Heal Reckoning, which has Reckoning and Eye for an Eye. Though they just want spell power. They just want plus healing. Like at the end of the thing, because they don't really scale with spell power at all. And they're so reflect damage and mana war centric in their play style. Those two paladins, that HP is king. HP is DPS on your paladin, especially in Season of Discovery. It's always been that way in Classic WoW, but especially in Season of Discovery, HP is king, HP is king, HP is king. Why is this? Well, it's because the more HP you have, the longer you can sit on top of the enemy and, like, pump Crusader Strikes and Divine Storms and auto attacks into them. The less it buys you more time to DPS on them, which is like the DPS is damage, and then the seconds, and seconds is going to be dictated by your standing HP, and then DPS versus HPS, right? So basically, this 135 HPS Paladin will probably be able to DPS on top of something it jumped on top of for like 15 seconds. Whereas this 150-40 HP Paladin might only be able to do it for about 10 seconds. And very, very quickly, you can see that HPS begins to turn into DPS very, very rapidly. Especially now that they gave us like Divine Steed and stuff, right? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Just general rules of time on target in general. What else is there to say? This is all stuff I basically said before. Yeah, and then Ret Reckoning would not be caught dead with plus healing gear. They're all in on trying to kill you, so they would literally just they would do this as well. So Control Ret wants to be more offensive. Ret Rec definitely wants to be more offensive. But then every other Paladin build really just wants plus healing on their gear primarily as much as possible. There's also an EVE Online rule effect. HPS and DPS are nowhere near. They're nowhere near close enough in World of Warcraft that this concept really comes into play. But where EVE Online rules really start to manifest themselves in Season of Discovery is when you're pressing W towards somebody, okay? So when you are running at your enemy, okay, EVE Online rules are suddenly become in full effect in Classic World in Season of Discovery. They just show up with a vengeance. The reason for this is because your enemy has to either stand his ground or get mobile. Typically, it's always the correct course of action for them to get mobile, meaning they have to start running away from you. While you are running at them, and while they are running away, your enemy's DPS goes to shit. Their DPS gets reduced to something stupid, like 1/3 of normal DPS or less, right? Because they're being forced to move and they can't hard cast spells. Meanwhile, your Paladin HPS also kind of greatly suffers, at least past the 12-second mark. At first, it's not too terribly bad because you have a hot rolling, you have Sacred Shield to work with, but generally speaking, your HPS isn't the greatest thing in the world either. That 135 HPS number is your mobile HPS, right? That is your HPS that you can typically rely on while running after an enemy. And this is what I mean by EVE Online rules start coming into play. So EVE Online rules basically works like this. Said it before, I'll say it again. So you'll gear up a ship in EVE Online. It'll have 300 DPS. And you're like, cool. But you could make it 350 DPS, right? But you realize you have to sacrifice something stupid, like 33% of your durability and survivability in order to go up plus 50 DPS. It seems mathematically like it's an insane trade, right? You're like, I gain plus 15% damage, but I become like, 33% less durable. Like, that's not worth it. But EVE Online is a bit of a bitch. And the enemy you're attacking might have 250 HPS. Okay? And you're you're bitch slapping him with 300 DPS. Which means that you're only doing 50 DPS worth of damage to this motherfucker in the grand scheme of things. If you increase your DPS by plus 50, that is a 100% increase in your effective DPS on the target, which means that you went from killing him in like 30 seconds to killing him in like 15 seconds. So very quickly it becomes super fucking worth it to increase your DPS by like 15 at the expense of like 33% of your effective durability. Yeah, so those are basically EVE Online rules, and it's something to keep in mind. In Season of Discovery, EVE Online rules really don't exist. When you're stuck hard casting heals, they don't really exist. When you're running away in a straight line, EVE Online rules come into play, but they also don't really exist. It's really when you're pressing W at the enemy that the EVE Online rules really start coming into play. So, for example, Sacred Shield and the Flash of Lights, it's like, okay, yeah, they're doing like, let's say 200 HPS. Well, your enemy's DPS went from like 1,000 DPS all the way down to like 333 a DPS, like probably less, probably like 300 DPS. Which means this motherfucker is only doing like 100 HP worth of damage to you a second in the grand scheme of things. It's literally going to take him like 60 seconds to kill you. Which is just ridiculous, right? Which it's obscene how bad it is for them. And that's where the HPS really shines on your Paladin. If that makes any sense. It's when you're mobile that Sacred Shield and plus healing is really worth its weight in gold. When you're rooted in place and forced to hardcast heals, the plus healing is only mildly good. But when you're mobile, it is insanely good. And of course, when you're there's no way to DPS a target as a paladin without being in a mobile state, if that makes any sense. All right, cool. Well, on the video here, and day useful, boys. Do 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 do.